If there is one book that perfectly describes the realities of the college admissions process, it is Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions by Jeffrey Selingo. This is a great book. This is a book I highly recommend for any prospective student who is looking at colleges or beginning that college application process. This is also a book that I recommend for parents of prospective students who are beginning that process. And I would even recommend this for higher education professionals as well. Now, this is a book that very clearly describes the whole environment of college admissions and what students and universities go through. And so in writing this book, Jeff Selingo followed about over 30 students who are looking at the college admissions process and really documented their decision making and sort of the experiences that they had along the way. And on the other side, he also sat down with admissions teams from a handful of universities, both public and private, and looked at their process. What did they experience? What sort of applications came across their desks? And what sort of conversations did they have when deciding who they would admit? This is a great book, and there is a lot of information, a lot of very specific tips for prospective students, and I don't want to give anything away, so I highly recommend you get yourself a copy and go check it out. So the book first begins by laying out this notion that we tend to pursue the prestigious universities, the brand names, because we see that if presidents and CEOs and very successful people attend these schools, then if I attend these schools or if my child attends these schools, will I have those same opportunities, and will that afford me the potential for upward mobility? But at the same time, when we think about these schools, we still can't quite define what prestigious means. And so in starting this process in the book, Jeff Selingo lays out a few very descriptive terms. And when it comes to the university side of college admissions, Selingo talks about buyers and sellers. So when we talk about buyers, we're talking about the vast majority of schools in the United States. Now, these are the ones who are actively seeking applicants because they're looking to increase their enrollment and fill seats in their classrooms. So they're more likely to have healthier financial aid packages, less selective, but also be a little bit more accepting and outgoing and maybe even aggressive in pursuing students who submit applications. Now, on the other side of that, you have sellers. These are the brand names. These are the prestigious ones, and everyone wants to attend a seller. So there's going to be a high volume of applications, which leads to high selectivity, and it can be very competitive. And this also leads to very selective financial aid packages that would most likely go to students with high financial need. And on the student side, Selingo introduces the terms of driver and passenger. Now, drivers are the students who are taking an active role in their college search and college application process. These are the ones who have always had their eye on college. They were doing the most research of the schools. They had a list. They were looking at majors that were offered. They were going on campus visits. They were taking part in a lot of colleges who do events for prospective students, and they were actively talking to their high school counselors for advice. On the flip side, you have the passengers, and these are the students who are taking a more passive role, that they may or may not want to go to college, they may or may not have an idea of where they want to go, or they may think they have an idea, but it may not be possible to attend a specific school, or they have no idea what they want to major in. So this leaves someone else, which is typically a parent, to sort of take charge of that process and pull that information on behalf of the student. So with these terms in mind, the book then proceeds to cover a multitude of topics across the chapters. So examples of this would include the college rankings, where it covers the history of the rankings, why they're so competitive and why schools try so hard to increase their ranking each year. It also talks about unique ways to get admitted, as a legacy or as an athlete. And so in this chapter, it talks about legacies, and that is where one or more parents have attended the school that you're applying to, and you now have that family connection. And many schools do honor this. And so if you are a legacy applying to a specific school, this may increase your odds of getting admitted. Now, for the athletics side, it's very interesting because we tend to think of the popular sports and the large schools when we think of college athletics. However, there are a lot of lesser known sports, and these are usually the sports that we watch when we watch the Olympics. And so we have a lot of these sports at a lot of smaller schools that are more of the buyers, if you will. And coaches need to fill roster spots. So you could have, for example, a field hockey player who could get admitted into an elite, small, private liberal arts school to play on the field hockey team because that roster needs that person. But if that field hockey player never played in high school, they may not have been as academically prepared and may not have been admitted to that exact same school had they not played hockey. There is another chapter that talks about the early decision process and the multiple phases of that. And it really sort of breaks down how the student views it and how the school views it. Now, a lot of students want to take advantage of early decision, and a lot of students want to try to take advantage of the system and use that to leverage their chances with other schools. And on the school side, this is really more so how they can increase the yield of their incoming class. And what that means is they just want to increase the number of admitted students and convert them into students who are saying, yes, I want to come attend your school. One of the more interesting things that I found in the book is discussing your high school. So when Selingo sat down and he talked with these admissions teams and he saw them deliberate over students' applications, there seemed to be a common theme. And so what would happen is they would review applications of students who came from what they would call feeder schools. So what this means is that a high school that traditionally sends a lot of students to that specific college, they're known as a feeder school. And the advantage of coming from a feeder school is that the college is very familiar with the curriculum. They may know the counselors well, and they are also aware of how rigorous the classes are, including the AP classes and the IB programs. So it can be an advantage, but it's also competitive at the same time, because if there are a lot of students coming to that college and you want to go to that same college, your class ranking may not make a difference because they know that curriculum so well that you could place high in your class, but the curriculum may not be that competitive. Now, on the opposite end of that, it also talks about students who apply to college and come from a high school that the admissions team is not quite familiar with. And this could be a disadvantage for the reasons that I talked about with the feeder schools, in that they aren't familiar with the curriculum and they don't know how rigorous those classes are. However, the positive perspective to this is that the student is unique. The student is coming from a high school that the college isn't familiar with, so this could add to the diversity of their incoming class. And so what you'll see a lot in this book is that, yes, it's important to be a very high-performing student academically and extracurricularly, but it's really more about the circumstances and the timing when you apply to college. And what I mean by that is the colleges are looking to form a specific incoming class, and so they can sort of pick and choose who those students are. So you could have 5 students who scored really high on their ACT and had a 4.0 and were involved, but not all 5 will get in. And there are many minor factors that could contribute to that decision. And the book sort of lays that out, and that's one of those things you need to read and discover for yourself. But it can also influence a lot of decisions for a lot of students. So again, I thought this was a great book. I thought it was a very easy, a relatively quick read. I thought the tone was very engaging and welcoming, and it really explained a lot of confusing concepts. So I think anyone who has no understanding of how a college admissions process works, I think they could walk away after reading this book and have a fair understanding of what it takes. So what are my takeaways? Well, I would say, for starters, don't dismiss a school because you've never heard of it. Now, there are those brand names, those sellers, and you sort of know what they have to offer, but there are hundreds of schools that could offer similar experiences, and it's not fair to count them out just because you've never heard of them before. And similar to that, I would say don't discount a school because it's too familiar to you or too comfortable. And so what this means is if there's a school right around the corner from your house or apartment, or if there's a school that everyone from your high school is going to, don't completely write them off your list just because you don't want to go where everyone you know is going as well. And there's an example of a student who is trying to avoid that in the book, and it didn't quite work out the way that she had planned. So don't discredit that, because there are plenty of opportunities literally close to your neighborhood, and this is something that you could overlook just because of a misperceived idea that it might be too familiar or too comfortable for you. The other thing I would look at is cost in talking about this book, because it really emphasizes that when it comes to understanding tuition and what that cost will be, we tend to want to push that to the back burner and not think about it until the end because it's so intimidating and overwhelming. But the opposite is really true. That's something you really need to consider up front, because you could get very far down the road and perhaps even admitted and ready to enroll to your dream school and finally get hit with the reality that you may not be able to afford it even with the financial aid package that school is offering. So I would almost consider that to be, the top one or two things when looking at a college and the application. And the last takeaway I had, and it's very similar to the first, is that we pursue the prestigious schools, and attending an elite institution, it may be impressive and it may give something for your parents to brag about, but it doesn't guarantee a positive student experience. And so this goes back to all of the things that I had mentioned throughout this book, and my takeaways is in that college application process and that college search process, really look into what that is that you want. Take into consideration the cost, the location, does it offer your program? Are there opportunities to get involved? Are there opportunities that will prepare you for life after graduation? And what do the faculty look like? Are you able to have conversations with them? Are you able to sit down with your classmates and have conversations? So go on those campus visits and you'll really start to get a feel for whether or not that college is for you. And you can even sort of get that idea through a virtual visit as well. So again, read this book. And if you've read it, I'm curious to see if you thought the same things as I did. So let me know in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like and hit subscribe, and I will see you next time.